Hello, my name is Paul and I've been attending the YorkElim Church for about 2 years. I thought it might be nice today if I shared a little bit of my story. I grew up in a housing estate in Glasgow, and I think it would be fair to say that my home life was fairly dysfunctional. It was mostly my mother who brought up me and my siblings. A whole number of men passed through our lives. They came and they went. But it was mostly my mother who looked after us. Very often at the weekend she would just go away, don't know where she went, and then she would come back on a Sunday and she would just leave us to fend for ourselves. However, one particular Sunday came and she never came back. She literally had just left home. She didn't come back, and we were there for a whole week and there was no grown up. We just had to fend for ourselves. Eventually, about a week later, my sister turned up and said that our mother wasn't coming back and that we should just pack up our belongings, that we could go and live with her. And so within the space of about half an hour, I had packed my clothes into a plastic carrier bag and was on the number 42 bus. And I was heading to a new home. I was leaving my friends, I was leaving my family home, I was leaving my school, and everything was about to change. I was terrified. I thought everything was going to change for the worst. But I was in for a very pleasant surprise. Little did I know that in the course of the last year, my sister had been attending the YorkElim Church and that she had become a Christian. And that was obvious. For the first time in my life, I had an amazing sense of security and peace and kindness. And it just completely changed my life for the better. It wasn't long after that I started attending the YorkElim Church. People in the church were amazing, knowing where we had all come from. They just looked after us, they visited us, they cooked for us, they spent time with us, we went on day trips. And it was just amazing to see how this church looked after us. In the years that were to follow, I went to a whole number of conferences and youth camps. Scottish Youth Camp really stood out. I met some incredible leaders and pastors who had an amazing influence in my life and encouraged me to go on and to pursue God and affirmed in me that God could even use the likes of me for His kingdom and for His ministry. In my early 20s, I decided that the best thing for me to do was to go to Bible college. I didn't go necessarily to become a pastor. I had an insatiable desire to learn about God and to study the Bible. But it was when I was at Bible college that the faculty and the principal continued to affirm the call of God in my life and encouraged me to apply for ministry. And so since my mid-20s, I have been a pastor in the Elim churches. It's not always been easy. It's not always been an easy journey. Being a pastor has its own set of stresses and heartaches and pressures. But probably the darkest season in my life is when my wife, Linda, fell very poorly, for us to discover that she had terminal cancer. And we just had to process that tragedy in our lives and to try and to get through that together while being in church leadership, while still trying to pastor the church. I have to say that through those dark days, that God on no occasion disappointed me. We often would say to each other, things were bad, but could we imagine how bad they would have been without God on our side? He comforted us, He blessed us, He brought people around us to look after us. Eventually, Linda did go to be with Jesus, and I had to go on that journey of rebuilding my life. And still God continued to be faithful, still God continued to be good. And of course, most of you know that in the course of that journey, I've been blessed for Deborah coming into my life, and then Robbie too. And what can I say through all of that pain and tragedy? I can say that God is faithful. I think that's the one word that I could use to describe God. In the book of Hebrews, it says that He will never leave us and that He will never forsake us. And I can say confidently to you today, to all of us, I can remind myself that has been absolutely true for me. And God has been true to His word. And I don't know what experiences everybody's gone through. This has been the craziest year in terms of our church, in terms of my ministry. And still I have a sense where God hasn't forgot about us. God hasn't left us or deserted us, and we're not on our own. And that He will continue to look after our church and our families and our friends. And so I just, in my own testimony, I've had to learn to trust God. And even through this season, I'm still learning to trust God. And so my testimony to you today is that God is faithful. And God is capable of taking a life which, by any account, would have ended up in complete disaster if it wasn't for God rescuing me. Such is the kindness of God. So I just want to say to everyone who's listening today, God is our refuge, God is our strength, and we can depend on Him. Thank you, everyone, and God bless.